Awesome. So, welcome, Shruti. I think me and Shubham both have critically researched about your startup, that is Apna Club, which is an agent-led B2B wholesale platform for fast-moving
Yeah.
consumer goods. Now, I guess this definition is like fairly
Yeah.
jargonish, right? So, like, why
Yeah.
don't you sort of break it down for us and sort of explain what all is it about?
Sure. So there are two kind of like very simple concepts that make up the need for Apna Club to exist, right? The first concept is that the world is moving towards what I think of as pull-based commerce. What that means is that customers see a range of options, they choose what they want, and then fulfillment gets it to them in the least time possible. That could be 15 minutes with like the Grofers and Swiggy kind of delivery. That could be 2 days with Amazon, or it could be honestly like 2 months with kind of some kind of cross-border flow, right? But the point is that in this kind of flow, the customer has infinite choice, price transparency, is booking an order, and that signal is being used by the system to decide, or not just like how to get this customer's order to them, but also decide for the future what the system looks like in the backend. The other kind of system is push-based commerce. If you look at it, 85% of India's FMCG distribution is push-based commerce. What is push-based commerce? It's literally someone says, okay, last year I did 100 boxes of detergent. This year, I think I can sell 110 boxes of detergent. This is how we'll do it. And then they push these 110 boxes out to sit on the shelves of various parts of the country. And then they are picked up. Now, obviously, in the second system, right, there is a lot more wastage. There's a lot more forced choice. There's a lot more kind of like, I would say, traditional data making these decisions. Now you think about new SKUs, you think about new flavors. How would you effectively design a system using push-based commerce for this? You can't. It's not the right way to even think about it. It's always best to get insights and data from many customers and harvest that data to decide what that like how many boxes of detergent of what flavor should be sent where. Now today India does not have that data harvesting system set up. That's what Apna Club is trying to do. Wholesalers and traders already form the backbone of India's distribution, right? But they're all extremely disorganized, very traditional. They have, by the way, really good local kind of like businesses that are like sitting and using data or sitting and using customer preference to decide buying, to decide stocking, to decide, intake and outtake. But none of these systems talk to each other. None of these people talk to each other. You can't find one place where brands can find the 200, 300 distributors that make the most sense for them to launch this product in this micro geography, right? So essentially what we want to do at Apna Club is to digitize this wholesaler and trader community and bring them online so that they can, basically just talk to each other, so that the systems can talk to each other, and we can start to bring this 85% of India's like distribution onto a pull-based commerce platform. And if you look at it, we're not the only ones, right? Like, so Shikhar, which is HUL's like direct ordering app, is doing this for just HUL products. And it uses kind of like, like direct distribution as the operational model. Now we are saying that, we'll take that same concept, but you will use not direct distribution, but another operational model, right? Which is like wholesaler based, like local as well as e-commerce fulfillment to drive this. So like there will be n number of like operational models, n number of acquisition models that will power this. But the essential concept is very simple. The world is going towards pull-based commerce. How do we get India's traders to join in and leverage their strengths to win against like some of these new players that are emerging?
Interesting. So if I'm not wrong, like the core idea here is demand aggregation, right? Like
Absolutely.
That is what we're trying to sort of delocalize it and sort of aggregate it at some level so that the
Yes.
pull-based side of things gets strengthened to that effect.
Absolutely. And then like, that's a simple thing, right? The wholesaler is already investing money into a warehouse, into distribution, into like, inventory, into like some customer outreach. How do you help them earn more money and how do you save more cost? Very simple. Like, like there's no other way to like really create a product. You can either help someone earn more money or you can help them save some costs as a B2B company. So that's what we want to do for wholesalers and traders, right? Like at the fundamental level. But how we can do that is by, kind of like giving them these tools, as you said, right, to like kind of like capture that demand, be able to analyze it, give them insights on what they should be ordering, and give them better rates and tools for everything. Like, and some of this is not just digital, right? Some of this could be buy packaging material at a better price, buy your supply of, like, let's say Godrej #1 soap at a better price. So like kind of like give them like services across the spectrum.
So this is a new concept for me, the previous conversation. So just want to understand. First of all, so right now, as you said that right now the commerce is push based. That is, I will create a product and then I'll expect people to buy it and I'll push it. And that is actually a very common saying that you need to push a product, right?
Yeah.
So, but then there will still be some market intelligence involved, right? That which product needs to be pushed. And then there's a simple demand supply key. If this product is already being sold so much and like how a product is getting built, right? So wanted to understand, how is this a market intelligence sort of a platform for both distributors and the manufacturer, where both of them know what they want to buy and what they need to create? Is it sort of, does it augment that process?
Yeah, so we want to move towards that process, right? And if you look at the best companies in the world, they're all getting to the place where sales is getting merged with inventory management. So you look at like some of these like phone retailers, right? You're thinking about launch events. You're thinking about, taking customer kind of like, you're taking pre-launch data, and then you're stocking accordingly and doing a big rollout. Now, the same thing can be done for every good and should be done for every good, right? This is just like how new retail will work. So what we want to do is enable this for all brands and all distributors. And again, right, like what you mentioned, which was, there is market intelligence. There is already some thought that goes into what will go where. Yes, typically what will happen is you will do a media buying plan. You will assume that awareness will go up to this level, and then you will seed the market, right? You will promise them, if this doesn't work, then we'll take it back. But obviously, this is like not going to be as seamless as just giving everyone kind of like, like one data platform and allowing people to take that ultimate choice themselves. You can convince a middle intermediary, big jayega, or you can just tell them, customer ne 10 order kiye hain, 15 stock karo, right? That's the difference that we're talking about.
Understood. So, because I remember reading about Paperboat and Epigam and how they actually went through this, and I'm sure that they must have had some sort of a market intelligence when they were developing their own products, right? So are you trying to imitate that same process, what they were using to the other retailers and other manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, like, so the problem between like kind of like, like trial and the problem between like slightly different problems. What we are saying is that, you make something available. You can only make it available at a certain kind of cost, right? So no matter what, Epigame is not going to stock its products all over India in one go. But honestly, like a Fair and Lovely or, like a ITC can do that and should do that. So there will always be, like so we're not saying that, we are going to make it easy for you to like launch like this. We're not a market sensing tool. What we are saying is that we are going to be inventory management and customer management for existing wholesale players. So this is a traditional community already in place, but they don't have tools that other people already have, right? So like, everyone has a customer kind of like sentiment measuring. Everyone has a sense of CRM. Everyone has inventory management systems. Everyone has automatic replenishment systems. Now, the tools that this community is working with are kind of like, older. The tools that they're working with are not as up to date. So the first step is to get them up to scratch.
Understood. That actually clarifies and sets the ground for more questions. Thank you so much for explaining this. So this seems like a very niche problem, as in not a niche, but a very detailed and narrow problem statement, right? So generally curious, how did you stumble upon this and problem statement and also the solution? I mean, there's a problem statement. How do you figure out that this is the best solution to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, so the problem is like, $50 billion worth of like goods are flowing through the system, right? So it's a very large market. And how we came to it was that, we were actually like selling, right? So we were looking at social commerce models and we were looking at what helps to get sales made. India has a lot of traditional traders, a lot of like, wholesale activity going on. What powers this economic activity is what I was trying to understand. So this was the time of the pandemic. I understood social commerce, right, to an extent. And I understood kind of like, these micro entrepreneurs in India's heartland. And I was very fascinated. How can you make them earn more? How do you help the seller sell more? So that is what we were interested in. And then because it was pandemic time, And we thought if nothing else, we'll keep consuming, right? So that's why I decided to double down on this sector. And that's how FMCG consumption and distribution became like our problem statement. What I was initially very interested in was like, how do you help these entrepreneurs sell more? And they're like, like these kind of resellers, by the way, Meesho has like done a fantastic job of highlighting so far, right? Then there is like, there's, by the way, in the Surge cohort, there are other companies that are also working with like, DSA models, and how do you digitize like direct sales agents. So I think like this is a fascinating part of India's, distribution and sales, like, backdrop that is just now starting to get a lot of tools that are being built out for them.
Understood.
Interesting.
What do you say would be the business model for you, as in where have you thought of a monetization plan as to where will you charge for your services?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so right now we just take a, we take a take rate on the GMV that is flowing through us. But what we would honestly like to do is, kind of like create the platform and charge people for services on the platform, right? So if you want to access credit, so we charge you for that. You want to access like kind of like, a Prime, Amazon Prime like subscription. So, better deals, quicker delivery. Then we want to charge you for that. If you want to advertise on the network, right? Because it's a great network for brands to access. Once people are built out and they're using the systems to like order goods, so then we want to charge people to access a community. So that would be kind of like how we'll really make our money.
Understood. Fair enough. That actually sounds quite interesting. But did you have another question?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to look more at the solution side of things. Like, of course, this was a space that you were already like fairly interested in and were exploring, and like the problem was fairly apparent. After that, like, what was the brainstorming process like? Like, was there some alternative solutions that you sort of considered before going with this? And like, what kind of a framework do you use to come up with the solution?
Yeah. I mean, so like, and that experimentation of the operational model and the acquisition models are still going on, right? So we are still at an early stage of our like journey. But how we've done things always at Apna Club is that we kind of like spin it up and we go out on the ground and we do it, right? And we try a lot to understand how things are happening right now, and how much of that can we digitize, or how much of that can we kind of like, clean up and like kind of like modernize or productize. So that's really been the major like effort. Understanding how the economic flows are happening right now is what takes up like kind of like a majority of like our time and thinking. And then how do you enable that into a productized flow is what the kind of like challenge is. And of course, these are kind of like very like real world scenarios, right? These are like very real world problems. Where you'll have like issues like, so I'll give you like what's the big challenge is that brands will frequently come out with different MRPs, or they'll come out with different like kind of schemes. But there is no universal kind of like language in which you can like maintain the SKU IDs, right? So if you promote something on a platform, but you don't have a great way to like, like correctly identify that this is the SKU ID that has been ordered and deliver exactly that to the customer, then that turns into a problem. So India is like this, like it's still like, in the process of formalizing. The simple answer is have EAN codes on everything. So EAN codes are like kind of like industry standard. They give you a lot of information about like weightage, grammage, brands, and so on. But it's not uniformly deployed across India, right? So in India, we actually deal with a lot of like, like real world, like, like the IRL or in real world problems that materials movement has. Another thing is like, fraud, right? So like, I think there's a lot of distrust and mistrust in the Indian system for good reason. There's a lot of like, like fake ordering that happens. So aside from actually solving the real challenges, right, which is like, how do you help people decide what to buy? You also have to create kind of like, these systems that ensures that no one is kind of like, like breaking trust, right? So we have vendors, you want to make sure vendors are sending the right goods. You have buyers, you want to make sure buyers want to receive the goods. You have third parties, you want to make sure they're giving you good services. So getting a lot of this to get cleaned up and working in India is kind of like a second big operational and product challenge that everyone is, I think, like working with. Like all e-commerce players, all distribution players are all kind of like coming up with ways to like figure this out.
Interesting. I really am actually like fascinated by how much close to the ground you would have to actually get to like figure out these problems in like that level of nuance, right? Even like, let alone offering something which is like a valuable offering, but to even understand these insights and really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think like it becomes very easy once you make a mistake and 5 customers are like coming at you, hey, you got this wrong. So which is why, go out on the ground and do it. That's kind of like, that has really helped us. My co-founder Manish also has spent like, like 25 years in sales and operations. He spent like, 5 years at Metro, 5 years at Walmart. So I think like, we're also blessed to have people who've lived these problems for a long time. And so then they join forces with us, right? And then we're on the product and tech side and we're saying, this is exciting. And, like we can do these things and we can change fundamentally how the goods flow happens. We can change fundamentally how people order. And that's exciting to them, right? But it's also based on like very real, real world economic activity.
I just wanted to add something here, that when you said that, you have a lot of conviction that what we're building will help you get more sales, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the process, have you come across something counterintuitive where you're telling them this will work and you have the math and the science to back it up, but people are like, no, I don't want to believe you. Like, what are some of the counterintuitive things have you come across while building and selling the solution?
I mean, I think you guys work at Cred, right? So I think like Kunal is kind of like the master of this, but human psychology is the biggest problem, right? So I think like, so convincing someone to do something in a new way is terribly difficult, right? And like very simple things, like pick up your phone and like, use it to search for products. That's not something that people really want to do. They're used to like salesmen coming up to their shops and kind of like, telling them, these are the goods I have, these are the prices I have, do you want it? Right? Now see, on the UI UX level, this actually makes sense, because when the salesperson is coming to your shop, it's probably like a 5 to 10 minute process to get your order done. And the current kind of like e-commerce platforms that we have, right? And the current kind of experience they give you, it might take you like longer to order things. You might not have as much control on kind of like the, so like imagine looking at a price list on your mobile phone screen and trying to read the, like first and second decimal point of the price, which matters in this trade, right? So there is a lot of ground to be covered on the one hand, in terms of product also, but two, there is also the psychology that I don't want to use a mobile phone to do like business, right? So you have today, I think like, the front runners, the people who are digitizing, but you still have the vast majority of people who don't trust kind of like, digital tools as much. And aside from that, I think like, one really huge problem, right, is like not so much being able to convince people. It's actually like, being able to deliver, in a broken trust model, right? So you have, so like, let's say I'm doing drop shipping, right? There is so much trouble in India with like kind of like, making sure that what has been committed is what is being sent out. And then if you kind of like try to internalize everything and do quality control, right, then you're basically setting yourself for massive working capital issues, right? Because obviously then you're taking goods onto your own book and you become responsible for the sale or the safe return. So I think these are not issues that I think like, that are like strange. That's what it means to do e-commerce. But I think they are kind of exaggerated in India, because we don't have as much trust in each other and as much trust in systems, right? So that's something again that I heard a lot from like colleagues at Surge, right? That kind of like outside of India, marketplaces are more robust. And so that really kind of like, that resonated with me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how, like, Tokopedia is so large. I don't know how these, I don't know how Alibaba convinced its like first 100 customers to just like freely send things. You hear the story of eBay, right? Where people are freely exchanging money and waiting for goods to turn up. That speaks of trust in each other in the system, which I think somehow like, it's something that, I think Indian e-commerce has always had to find like ways to get around, and COD. Right? So I think COD was like that key, like, trust to nahi hai, but samne aa jayega to paise de denge, right? So like it's a different ecosystem and you need different product solutions to it.
Oh, this was very interesting about the COD aspect.
Yeah. Moving on, actually. Yeah. Right. Something interesting I actually picked up on, you telling about how you started up with your core team, with Manish and all, the kind of experience and familiarity that people had with the problem, right? And we have like stalked you fairly well, and we know that like the kind of background that you have, which is like relatively in B2B marketplaces, at least what I've seen a lot more of, people who are more like a lot familiar with the problem and industry tend to approach it. And your track has been more around, right, from consulting to VC and then around here. So just like curious about how that journey transition was like, what things from that you picked up there worked and what did not work, and you had to sort of revise yourself to figure out?
Yeah. I think like I actually came from a place of like genuine humility, because as a consultant and as an investor, you tell a lot of people that you should do these things. Why don't you do this acquisition? Why don't you build out this product? And I've also worked a lot with the kind of like impact kind of like companies where you don't get as much money, and you don't have like that super high market return. You're not like you're not like this SaaS company on the way to becoming the next like Decacorn. And so you're working with a lot of like different like constraints. And I remember thinking at some point that I don't actually have the experience of doing what I am asking people to give me updates on, and I could see kind of like both the rush of getting the problem solved and the struggle of not getting it solved. And that I realized was something that I was the most fascinated by, right? That part of like journey was like calling to me in some ways. So that's why I wanted to get into an operating role. I wanted to see something, I wanted to build something with my own hands and see it go from 0 to 1, right? So that was like kind of the first part of what got me to startup. And I thought a lot actually about like, like joining a great company and learning from people. But I think like, I was at Harvard Business School, and then I think like the greatest thing that has happened to me is, like going there and kind of seeing how much people have done, with their time, and how much people have achieved and how kind of driven they are. And I was like, okay, like this is just like, this very safe thinking in some ways, right? That like, let me like learn more and then do something once I've learned something. As long as like, my investors trust me with their money, I think it's actually like the fastest way for me to do this is to jump into this and do it myself, right? So that's how I decided, like let me just start up. I genuinely, when I started off, I was very interested actually in entrepreneurs and culture, right? So I started off as a travel entrepreneur. And I did not intend to end up in FMCG distribution. But the other part of my personality is that I hate to kind of like give up on things. And I had taken money from like, angels and my first institutional investor. And I was determined to kind of like, build something that made sense out of, everything. So perseverance and like, just like kind of like wanting to stay alive guided us to this path. But again, like the principle had to be that, like I was doing something that would help, entrepreneurs earn more, and to earn more, they therefore like sell more. And that's what I kind of like kept coming back to. And I think like being kind of like mentally determined and willing to take the knocks that like entrepreneurship will give you, that helps you a lot, like because you will fail for sure. So like like I have my days when I feel like kuch nahi kaam kar raha. So I have my days and I'm like, oh my god, we are going to change India's distribution systems. So I think all of you guys have started things up, right? So you know how it is. Some days are like high, some days you're low.
And
curious to know, like what kind of is there like a mental model or like a framework or general approach you follow towards keeping yourself sane in some of these moments, because it can get a lot, right? And at times like the highs are super high, as you said, lows are super low. So what keeps you sort of persevering? Like, is there some kind of a long-term mission of the startup, or is it like something more internal to you, which sort of powers the perseverance?
I think like, I used to believe that mission matters a lot, right? But frankly, when, like in the travel, in the early stages, when I was trying to do like this very like, cool, how do you explore alien spaces in India, right? Like, can you live with like Buddhist monks? Can you understand like, like what life on a Telugu like plantation is like? So, growth nahi tha. So you didn't have that fast-paced growth, and that has its own dissatisfaction, right? On the other hand, like, like having a model where we can see traction, where we can see need, where people are consuming the good, it has a lot of satisfaction, right? So I think like there is like you have to understand that not everything in life is about like very fast growth or kind of like painless digital ramp up. There are things in life that only accrue so slowly. There are things in life that like only like that it take time to develop. So I think mentally I had to be at peace that what I want to do right now allows me to only work in certain kinds of models. And I need to be very real with myself, that if I want to be a fast-paced VC funded entrepreneur, and these are the kinds of models that I can work with. These are the kinds of things I can build. And so I think that like being kind of like honest with yourself has to be there. I think that you can build a great travel platform in India, which will be VC funded, will make a lot of money. I don't think that it will be very impactful, right? So like trying to keep it very clear in your mind what you want to do at this point is what helps. And second thing is, I think we all live in a time where our privilege is like so apparent, right? All three of us, to anyone who's like kind of listening to this kind of like show, or like this kind of or reading these kind of articles, it's kind of very like you are by nature of what you're doing in a certain privileged class that can rely on knowledge work to sit at home and build something, right? Or at worst to kind of be in charge of other people who are building. And in the pandemic, people have had like literally had to find like where will they eat food from day to day. They've had like the kind of like like sustenance and existence like disrupted. I think like we have very small problems, once you get to this stage. I think that makes it very easy for me to survive the lows. I have the lows, and what I remind myself of is that like you're being anxious about a great opportunity. So it's okay. So if you can do something about the anxiety, do it. Otherwise, it's it's just your brain kind of reacting to its own relativity. And I think like reminding yourself that helps a lot. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. You just need to ground yourself and remind yourself of how privileged you are. And I think like the lows kind of like take care of themselves with that. That said, again, mental health is mental health, right? Yeah. So if you're systematically feeling something, I think the best thing to do is ask for like some like help. And that part again, it just comes down to like luck and your biology and your genetics.
On the topic of MBA, just curious, right? Like what if you were to sort of point out to some point in time where you sort of decided that, yeah, I'm going to start up? Like when was that? And was that like before you went to Harvard, or was it in that place that you sort of figured out that you want to do this?
Right. I mean, I did go into HBS kind of like knowing I wanted to work with startups post HBS, right? So when I was leaving Omidyar Network, which is like my, my last role, I knew that I wanted to go into a startup, and like HBS for me was kind of like a time to really like in some ways figure out what sectors most interest me and what companies and what models, right? So by the way, Impact has like a very big role in my life. My partner actually runs like a ed tech nonprofit, and so that's something that we were trying to figure out, right? So that was supposed to be 2 years for exploration and introspection. And I think like Harvard just made me like more ambitious, right? It made me kind of like more impatient and said, let me do this now. But I think I went in like knowing that I wanted to do startups.
This is a very frank question. Does MBA add value? Let's say I want to start up tomorrow. Do you think the experiences and the practicalities that you learn there, do you think that are really applicable? Or just by attending an MBA, do you think you are now better prepared to start up than versus if you would have started up without doing an MBA?
Right. I think it just comes back to the same thing, right? Which is like, how much time do you want to give yourself and how many resources you want to spend on preparing yourself for something, right? And an MBA is expensive, an MBA in terms of money and time, right? But it is literally like the place where I have found like kind of like, my best friends, and I've formed like kind of like, my personal, like circle of trust. So if you think that it's important to find ambitious, smart people who will challenge you and push you to like, think bigger, do better, then I think an MBA is a great place to find them. Now, even joining a really fast growing, smart kind of like startup will give you the same environment according to me now, right? But I think when I went in, the MBA path was kind of like easy for me to understand. And I knew that if I was going to a Harvard, then I would get to meet some really great people. I think it's a little harder to know that, if you're going to a seed or Series A funded startup, will you meet great people over there or not? If you go to a larger startup, will you get to do meaningful work or not? I think like some of my uncertainties over there like kind of like remain because I didn't end up following that path. But I think like, yeah, I mean, I think an equally good way for me to prepare myself would have been to like join something for 2 years and really learn what processes and what kind of people like make for a successful team. And I think it's just about, how much time do you want to spend on like building yourself up. And yeah, I think an MBA has been great, right? A lot of people have never handled kind of like teams and people and operations, in roles like mine, right? Like especially so as a consultant, as a junior, or as a investor, you're not managing teams of people, and that's kind of like one of the biggest changes that has happened, right? I now am building out this like really large team, and choosing the right people, choosing the right culture, like building the right culture is the most important thing I can do. I think I learned a lot about it at MBA. And I met a lot of people who had done it, right? So I kind of expanded my, like I said, my circle of trust was expanded. So I can reach out to 5 people and ask them, hey, I'm trying to do like distribution in in rural India, and I want to find a great person, who would be absolutely wizard at like setting up warehouses. What things should I look for? Or do you have references? So it just expands the circle in those ways also, and as well as like teaches you what to even look for.
That's actually quite interesting about the network part. The network always helps, I think. Yeah.
On the topic of hiring and network, this is more around how you operate as a founder, right? And for anyone who's sort of interested in something like Apna Club. So how do you pick your core team? And what would be the kind of people who would succeed at Apna Club and who would not?
Yeah, no, so 100% why I wanted to do this, right? Like this is a big advertorial, guys. I just want you all to come and join me. So I think like very early team, right? We're early stages. I think like, we're like 3 months into product build out, right? And like it's 9 months of operations, but we've only recently acquired like our tech and product team, because now I can pay for them. And I think it's very easy if you are a person who kind of like takes ownership, who loves data and is very interested in kind of like building out something for entrepreneurs, right? Building out something that helps people earn more. You like that impact angle, and it will help you like get through like kind of like the long nights of like trying to understand a very new audience. I think then Apna Club is a great option for you.
Really sorry to break you off. Yeah, can you please continue?
Oh, yeah, so I think like, if you like setting up things on your own and you're data driven, and you kind of like, so if you like this conversation, if you like the kind of vibe I give off, that's about it. It's a small team. This is what it'll feel like, so come join us.
That and this is one of the things that we also invite startup founders, so that because much of our audience is also very young and looking for is very startup enthusiastic. One thing that I wanted to ask you is so you talked about how your MBA helped you and get you a better network. I also wanted to ask you that what are the previous experiences that you have maybe experienced in consulting or VC that have helped you directly, that okay, I learned this there, and some things are those biases that you came forward with, and some things those that backfired, that you thought they would work really well because you experienced it there, but they didn't work out very well here.
Yeah. So I think some mistakes, so let me start with the mistakes, because, those are easier to like know. I think like having an expectation that everyone will work with kind of like the same, set of like, well, I would say like, with the same kind of like convictions is wrong, right? So even if someone says that they want to go on a startup journey and they have like, kind of similar sounding motivations, you will not know until, a shock comes about who will stay and who will not stay. That's like the one big mistake, right? So try to understand that you can't prepare for people, having different risk appetites. You cannot prepare for like, kind of like catastrophe when it comes. Like, and we went through catastrophe, right? We went travel startup, pandemic comes, there is zero revenue. So that will happen. And you will not know how people will react. So I think like going in, leaning too hard on one or two people is not a good idea. You need to have a broad-based system. You need to have multiple people, because some people will not be able to continue, right? And I think that's a mistake that I made partially, right? But I got lucky because we had hired some other people who kind of really stepped up to the situation. So So that is one thing. The second kind of like big mistake is like, you need to be 100% clear in your conversation upfront about what you want and what you will give, right? So I think a lot of times, like where I have really kind of like, gone wrong on, I would say, hiring, is not having an upfront conversation with someone. What role will you play? What will you get out of it? What will your exact, like, kind of like compensation or like, kind of like equity be? And that's something that I like really do regret, right? Like you lose good people, who, if you had the right first conversation, you would have just like held on to. So I think like those are the kind of like the big mistakes that you can make at, like the first stage. I think like in terms of, what we have, like what I have, what I bought with me that helped me run a startup well. I think investing and consulting both do give you very structured kind of like thinking processes, right? So I have been concentrating on kind of the strategic questions from the beginning. Sometimes that can be quite dispiriting, right? Because you're like, oh, ye to ho hi nahi sakta hai. And it does take like someone, like you have to believe that the world will change, the behaviors will change in some ways to be startup entrepreneurs, right? And sometimes I think like, when I look at all the data about how many people, actually use like digital tools in like, kind of like our target group set, it's quite, it can be quite sad. Then you see like something like a COVID happens and like behavior starts to rapidly kind of like lift. So I think like, so some of that structured thinking, kind of like helps, but also like, it can be kind of like too much of a reality check. Yeah, I mean, like, frankly, you come from very, like resource rich environments when you're in investing and consulting. In consulting, you're working with like very established companies. In investing, you're like, you're giving the money. So I think like, you don't understand how constrained environments can be, even after being funded, right? We know that we need to have a runway of 2 years. We know that we're going into a talent war in India. So, no matter what, you will always, kind of like, so you are not prepared for what the pressure of like, like this kind of environment is. So I think like that's like the challenge that like consulting and investing does give you. But yeah, I mean, you come in with very structured thinking. You're able to like finance models. You're able to budget yourself well. You're able to project like what you need. You're able to like kind of clinically think through what you need to roll out. So those advantages stay with you.
Interesting. So on an ending note, Shruti, would like to know what your sort of long-term vision for Apna Club is.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I think like, like with Apna Club, we want to do some very simple things, right? Which is that get people who are like traders and distributors to adopt this pull-based commerce system, right? So build for them like, the tool that helps them understand what consumers are looking for. Build the tools that helps us to like, aggregate demand at the local level and, satisfy it well. I think if we do this, we'll basically end up like increasing incomes for this community. We'll end up giving consumers in these areas greater choice, and we'll end up like building something for new brands to like ride on, right? A lot of like, India's FMCG like scene is like very consolidated. Like 3 or 4 companies make up like majority of consumption. So I think like, kind of like opening out distribution to like many brands, many SMEs will be really helpful to get everyone kind of like, like growing. So I think like that's the kind of like long-term vision that we have for Apna Club.